Hi guys, I hope you had a lovely couple of holidays, if there were holidays in your part of the world. Today I'm coming to you with the first of a handful of end of the year reflections, new year resolutions kind of videos. And I'm going to start this little series with an easy one, and one that's hopefully non-controversial. I'm in two minds as to whether I should make one of those worst reads of the year videos, because when people see what's on there, I might be asked to leave the internet forever. So I have made a list of 10 authors that I discovered in 2019 and that I would like to read more of in 2020. I am not including on this list brand new authors and/or authors who have maybe one book out, maybe even just a novella. You are going to see some of those authors on my best reads of the year list. All of the authors that I'm going to name in this video have some kind of backlist. There are even 2 dead authors on here, so backlist only, most likely. The first author that I'm going to name here is the new favorite that I most recently discovered, and that is Anthony Burgess. I am at the moment reading A Dead Man in Deptford, which is my first Burgess. This is the fictional reconstruction of the life and death of Christopher Marlowe, the Elizabethan playwright and poet. And it is just the most intelligent body romp that you will ever read, I promise you. Now that I have discovered what Anthony Burgess can do, I am more curious about A Clockwork Orange, which I had never previously been drawn to picking up. But I think the next book that I'm going to go to after this one will be Nothing Like the Sun, which is the Shakespeare book. Seems right after the Marlowe book. And my next author is the second and last dead one on this list, and that is James Baldwin. I read Giovanni's Room this summer and absolutely loved it. I'm just a sucker for total bleakness and hopelessness in my stories, especially if the characters have brought it on themselves. I'm sorry. I've still only read Giovanni's Room so far, but I have quite a good Baldwin collection now. I have Go Tell It on the Mountain, Another Country, and If Beale Street Could Talk with a movie tie-in. I actually included If Beale Street Could Talk on my 5-star predictions list sometime earlier this autumn. But I have to admit that right now I'm actually more interested in Go Tell It on the Mountain, so I might read this one first, sorry. And now for someone completely different, Annamarie McComas. I read Wild Beauty this summer, and while it wasn't completely to my taste, it was a bit too sugary, flowery, sappily sweet. While it wasn't completely to my taste, I was still very taken with the richness of McComas' imagination and how she had theme and literary genre intertwine. And I am so intrigued by the sound of some of her other books, especially her most recent ones, Blanca and Roja and Deep and Darkest Red, which is due to be published in January and which is a retelling or is inspired by the tale of the Red Shoes and is set in Prague. And my fourth author is Colson Whitehead. I only discovered him for myself this year, but I've already read 3 of his novels, his 3 most recent ones. And while I wasn't too impressed by the Nickel Boys, to be honest, I loved The Underground Railroad and Zone 1, the zombie novel. And I just love how versatile he is. I'm curious about anything he does, and I already own 2 of his earlier books, The Intuitionist, which was his first novel, and John Henry Days. The Intuitionist is, I think, a commentary on race and social mobility, or the lack thereof. And John Henry Days is a commentary or possibly satire on the American dream. Again, I think. Haven't read it yet, have I? Author number 5 is Frances Harding. I've read only one of her books so far, The Lie Tree, which is her most famous one because it won the Costa Book Award. I just love her style, her themes, her characters, and her diligence and thoroughness when it comes to world building. I mean, this is a historical novel, but I guess you can call it world building nonetheless, because after all, the 19th century doesn't exist anymore, does it? And based on what I've seen in here, I'm convinced that anything that Frances Hardinge writes is at least worth reading. I have bought 2 of her middle grade fantasy books, but I am most interested in A Skinful of Shadows, which is, I think it's on the brink between middle grade and young adult, and it is about a young girl in 17th century England who is possessed by the spirit of a dead bear. I'm also very interested in Frances Hardinge's most recent book, Deeplight, which came out in autumn in hardback. I'm waiting for the paperback to come out. Next up, Patricia A McKillip. I read The Bell at Sealy Head in November and The Changeling Sea on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. You are going to hear more about that one in my December wrap-up. These are both somewhat whimsical but very old-school fantasy of manners, and they are just light-hearted comfort reads, and sometimes you just need some of that in your reading life, don't you? And my next author is kind of the odd one out, because I actually read my first book of hers in 2018 and didn't like it, and that is Virginia Woolf. And the book of hers that I read was To the Lighthouse, and I thought that that was just an overwrought and overindulgent and unjustifiedly smug treatise on a very trivial subject that has been done and had been done before over and over again, but with actual plots. But then this year I read A Room of One's Own, and I actually liked her writing style in that one a lot. And I've always been interested in Mrs. Dalloway and in Orlando, and I feel like I have to have read Mrs. Dalloway in order to be allowed to read Michael Cunningham's The Hours, which I would like to read very much. And there's also a book that came out this year called Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by an author that I'm going to look up and provide up here. And that one's based on Orlando, and I'm very interested in that one also, and I feel like I have to have read the original ones before I indulge in the new and interesting ones. And they are both very short books, so I think I'm just going to throw them in as soon as possible. And my last 3 authors come in a package because they are all female crime fiction authors. Number 1 is Attica Locke, who wrote The Cutting Season, which is one of the most complex and atmospheric contemporary murder mysteries that I've ever read. Number 2 is Anne Cleeves, who wrote the Shetland series, and number 3 is Tana French, who wrote the Dublin Murder Squad books, among others. Out of these 3, I probably like Tana French the least, but I still definitely want to read more of her Dublin Murder Squad books, and I'm going to read the Shetland series by Anne Cleeves as long as it doesn't get stale. And Attica Locke's present series is the Highway 59 series about a black detective in Texas, and I'm very curious about that after The Cutting Season, which was such a great book. So, if I have counted correctly, these are 10 authors that I would like to read more of in 2020. Count this as my first reading resolution for the new year. And do let me know in the comments if you have a similar resolution, if there are authors at the back of your mind which you feel that you absolutely must read more of in the coming year. I'll see you very soon with my next review/resolutions video. Bye!